Good morning. You may have noticed as we have been working through Psalms that after 5 introductory sessions, I kind of began to work through Psalms one by one, and I was up to about, Psalm 11, 12, something like that. In my own personal devotions, I'm also going through Psalms. A lot of what I do in preaching or teaching comes out of my own personal devotions. And as I looked this morning at Psalm 46, I was literally so excited that I'm going to break that pattern. And we're going to look at Psalm 46 today. So let me share my screen. And we will come over here to our old friend Bible Gateway and copy this Psalm, and then over here in a Word document. So there we go. We have Psalm 46 here. So if you will look at this with me, first of all, one of the things that we notice we haven't really talked about before, and that is the use of the word interlude, or actually the Hebrew word is Selah. We're not totally sure what that is, but it appears that it's a reference to musical segues. It's a reference to playing instruments at appropriate times. Now, what this does is we learn what the psalmist intended as natural divisions in his psalm. So we have 3 selahs here, and what we have is 3 stanzas of a particular hymn to be sung. So let's just read quickly through that. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. A river brings joy to the city of our God, the sacred home of the Most High. God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. The nations are in chaos and their kingdoms crumble. God's voice thunders and the earth melts. The Lord of heaven's army is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Come and see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction upon the world. He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bow and snaps the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be honored by every nation. I will be honored throughout the world. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. And there the psalm is. Now, looking for relationships and things that happened here. First of all, we noticed, following the Hebrew poetic rule of parallelism, we see that each stanza begins with a statement about God. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. After that, we have 4 lines. We will not fear when earthquakes come. And the mountains crumble into the sea. Let the oceans roar and foam. Let the mountains tremble as the waters surge. Then we get the next 2 lines. A river brings joy to the city of our God, the sacred home of the Most High. Now, we have here an expansion on that. God dwells in that city, it cannot be destroyed. And then, again, we get the four lines. The nations are in chaos, their kingdoms crumble, God's voice thunders, and the earth melts. But we finish with this statement. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. The last stanza, come see the glorious works of the Lord, see how he brings destruction. And then we get, now we had been getting 4 lines. It looks first like we have 3 here, but he breaks the bow and he snaps the spear and he burns the shields with fire. There are the 4 lines that we've come to expect up above. Another statement, be still and know that I am God. I'll be honored by every nation. And then the Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Now, it was at this point, after having broken down the psalm like this, that I began to notice, look here, for example, and you see that this line is actually repeated up here. So here's something that the psalmist, unknown, all we know is that it's written to the descendants of Korah, and it's supposed to be sung by sopranos. I'm going to put a little bit of a break here after each interlude so that we recognize them as stanza. The Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. Occurs in both the second and the third stanza. We also notice that we have one additional item for our information. Here, a command. And then here, another item for our information. God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. Now, as we begin to look, let's start to make some of our observations down here. First of all, we note that there are 3 stanza. We note that the second and third end with repetition. We've highlighted that up above. And then we also note that each stanza begins with a statement of God's presence. Let's take a look at what those statements are. In verse 1, the statement is, God is our refuge and strength. See that back up here. God is our refuge and strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. And the second stanza, which starts in verse 4, we see a river brings joy to God's city. Take a look at that back up here. River brings joy to the city of our God, the home of God Most High. And then finally here in verse 8, it's not so much a statement as a command. Come and see the glorious work of our God. Come see the glorious works of the Lord. See how he brings destruction upon the world. Now, we also get Each stanza presents 4 lines focusing on Israel's troubles. From 2 to 3, what we get, if you look back up here, earthquakes, mountains crumble, oceans roar and foam, the waters surge. God is our refuge and strength during times of natural disasters, and specifically earthquakes and floods are mentioned. From verses 5 and 6, actually I need to modify that, don't I? It's just verse 6. Nations are in chaos, their kingdoms crumble, God's voice thunders and the earth melts. God is present in times of international chaos when nations crumble. And then finally, in verse 9, God is present. He causes wars to end. He breaks the bow, snaps the spear, burns the shields with fire. God is present at times of war. Another thing that we notice is in the second and third stanza, repeats a statement of God's presence. And that's this statement: the Lord of heaven's armies is here among us. The God of Israel is our fortress. And finally, we notice that the second and the third stanza contain an additional statement. The first in verse 5, preceding the 4 lines of international chaos. And what verse 5 says is it reaffirms God's presence. God dwells in the city of God. It cannot be destroyed. God will protect it. So God dwells in his city. It cannot be destroyed. And then the second statement we find in verse 10. And this is in the form of a command. God's himself speaking, be still and know that I am God. Very interesting here. The structure of the psalm, the structure of the hymn. If we were to put this in hymn form today, we would have a verse and a chorus, a verse and a chorus with a segue in between, a bridge, and then a second bridge at the end, a verse and a chorus, an additional bridge, and then the second bridge is repeated again. Very carefully laid out what it means, what the whole psalm is talking about is God's presence with us when things get tough. So we're living in a time when things are tough. Frankly, if we look at it, I don't think we have ever lived in a time when things were not tough. There is always some form of trouble that's popping up and consuming us. God is with us. God is present. What we need to do is calm our hearts, be still, know that He is God, know that He is with us.